I never thought I'd have to deal with someone like Diane Miller, the president of our Homeowners Association (HOA). Living in Sunnyside Estates seemed like a dream when I first moved in 3 years ago. The neighborhood was beautiful with well-kept lawns and matching mailboxes. But under that perfect surface, the HOA president, Diane, had a lot of power and control. My first problem with Diane came shortly after I moved in. I made the mistake of planting purple petunias instead of the approved red ones. Diane left a notice on my door saying the flowers didn't meet neighborhood standards. I replaced them, thinking it wasn't worth arguing. Little did I know, that was just the start of her controlling behavior. This summer, which was the hottest on record in our area, temperatures were reaching the high 90s for weeks. As a software engineer working from home, I relied on my air conditioning to keep my workspace cool. More importantly, my father had recently moved in with me after heart surgery. His doctor warned that extreme heat could worsen his condition, so the air conditioning was necessary for his health. One Tuesday afternoon, during a video call, I noticed the house was getting warmer. I checked the thermostat, but it was off. This was strange because I had just had the system serviced the week before. I excused myself from the meeting and went outside to check the unit. That's when I saw Diane standing next to my air conditioning unit with a padlock in her hand. "What are you doing?" I asked, trying to stay calm despite feeling angry. She didn't seem embarrassed at all. "Your unit violates HOA regulations," she said smugly. Section 12, paragraph 4 clearly states all exterior fixtures must be approved by the board. This new unit wasn't approved. I took a deep breath. This is the same unit I've had for 3 years. I just had it serviced last week. Well, the technician clearly made modifications that altered its appearance. "It needs to be reviewed and approved at our next meeting," she replied, locking the unit's electrical disconnect. "You can't do this. My father is inside, and he has a heart condition. He needs the air conditioning," I explained, feeling my worry grow. Diane just rolled her eyes. "Everyone has an excuse. Rules are rules. You can file an emergency appeal, but the committee won't meet until Friday," she said. She handed me a violation notice and walked off, her sandals clicking on the pavement. I immediately called the HOA management company to explain the situation. They were sympathetic but said they couldn't override the president without a meeting. I mentioned my father's health, but they suggested I find another place for him to stay until the issue was resolved. Helpful, right? By now, the house was getting very warm. My father, always calm, said he was fine, but I could see he was uncomfortable. I set up fans and gave him cool compresses, but with the outside temperatures nearing 100 degrees, it wasn't enough. Later that evening, I called my neighbor, Tom, a retired electrician. He came over to check the padlock on the air conditioning unit. "This is ridiculous," he said, shaking his head. "And potentially dangerous. Your father's health is at risk. Is there anything you can do?" I asked, hoping for a solution. "Legally, I can't remove the lock," Tom said. "But I can tell you this lock is not approved by the HOA, and she had no right to put it on your property without proper notice." That gave me an idea. I thanked Tom and went inside to do some research. I spent the night reading through our HOA rules and state regulations. By morning, I had a plan. I documented everything: the rising temperature in the house, my father's condition, and all my interactions with Diane. I took photos of the lock and the air conditioning unit. Then I called my father's doctor, who wrote a letter explaining that extreme heat posed a risk to his health. Next, I contacted a lawyer friend who specialized in property law. She confirmed what I suspected: Diane had overstepped her authority. In our state, interrupting essential services like air conditioning could be considered harassment, or even elder abuse, given my father's condition. With all this information, I decided to play by Diane's rules. I filed an official complaint with the HOA, hoping to finally put an end to her overreach. I sent an official complaint to the HOA board, copying each member individually. I pointed out several specific rules Diane had broken, including not giving proper notice, entering private property without permission, and putting my father's health at risk. But I didn't stop there. I also called the local building inspector, who told me that messing with air conditioning systems without permission was against the law. He agreed to come by that afternoon. By noon, my father was showing signs of heat exhaustion. His face was red, and he looked confused. I called 911 right away. When the paramedics arrived, they quickly realized how serious it was. They treated my father on the spot and said the heat in the house had made his condition worse. One paramedic asked how the house had gotten so hot. When I explained and showed them the locked air conditioner, they exchanged looks. "Sir, this could be considered elder endangerment," one of them said. "Would you like us to call the police?" I nodded. It had gone too far. The police arrived soon after, and I told them everything. They took pictures of the lock, the violation notice, and my father's medical records. Then they asked if I knew where Diane lived. Of course I did. She made sure everyone knew which house was hers. I watched from my driveway as 2 officers went to her door. She answered, wearing her HOA shirt, looking annoyed until she saw who it was. Even from far away, I could see her face change from irritation to confusion. The officer spoke with her for several minutes. She gestured wildly and pointed at me several times. Finally, one officer took out a notepad, and that seemed to make her lose it. I could hear her yelling, "I'm enforcing the rules." The rules everyone agreed to follow. While this was happening, the building inspector arrived at my house. He checked the air conditioning unit and the lock, taking notes and pictures. "This unit is up to code," he confirmed. "And this lock is definitely unauthorized. I'm citing the HOA for this violation." To my surprise, the officers came back with Diane. She wasn't in handcuffs, but she wasn't happy either. One officer came up to me. "We need to remove this unauthorized lock to restore your services, especially because of your father's condition. Ms. Miller is refusing to give us the key, saying it's HOA property. Do we have your permission to cut it off?" "Absolutely," I said, keeping my eyes on Diane, who was fuming. "You can't do this," she shouted as the officer used bolt cutters to remove the padlock. "This is HOA property. He's in violation. I'll report all of you." The officer calmly responded, "Ma'am, please lower your voice. We've explained the situation. You had no authority to disable this unit, especially after being told about the medical need." Once the lock was removed, my neighbor Tom helped me get the air conditioning running again. The cool air started flowing, and I felt a huge relief. My father would be okay. But it wasn't over yet. The officers spoke with Diane again, this time in a more serious way. I didn't hear everything, but I caught words like reckless endangerment and elder abuse. Her face turned pale, and to my shock, they actually handcuffed her. As they escorted her to the police car, she looked at me with a mix of shock and anger. "This isn't over," she shouted. "The board will hear about this." The next day, I got a call from the vice president of the HOA board, who was extremely apologetic. An emergency meeting had been held, and Diane was removed from her position. They promised to put in place new rules to prevent this kind of abuse in the future. 3 weeks later, Diane's case went to court. She was sentenced to a year of probation, fined $5,000, and ordered to complete 200 hours of community service working with elderly care organizations. When the judge read out the sentence, Diane looked shocked, her carefully controlled image falling apart under the weight of the consequences.